Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We are just getting settled and getting started here. We're going to allow a few moments for folks to join the room, join the space. And so this is a great moment to get comfortable, and then we'll get started here in about 2 minutes. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. We will get started here in just one more minute. We're allowing folks to join the space. I see that folks are still joining, so I'm inclined to just give like maybe one more minute as folks join us. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, good afternoon. My name is Natasha Erskine. I'm here in Chicago. I'm excited for you all to join us today as we talk about, the importance of counter-recruitment, truth in recruiting, and how we stand in solidarity and empower in this moment. And so I'm excited to be a part and in community with you all as we talk about what that looks like. So here in Chicago, we'll get to some of that in a moment. I just really want to talk to folks that are, not on the panel and those that are viewing with us. Thank you all for joining. And just a couple of things. Throughout this meeting, there'll be an opportunity for you to use the Q&A, which we have a point in the agenda when we'll take some questions for the panel. And so feel free to do that throughout our talk, and we'll get to those at that moment. And then in the meantime, please share reflections in the chat. All of the panel, we can all see the chat, so please make use of that. Give some spirit and solidarity as we move forward. But yeah, so if there are, again, we have folks that are joining us. So just for the benefit of those, we have a Q&A function that you should be able to see here. Once you click on that, you'll be able to add your question there, and we'll do a live answering towards the end of the agenda. And then in the meantime, use the chat just to share some reflections, thoughts that you might have. All of us can see the chat function if you're inclined to use that. So again, my name is Natasha Erskine. I'm the Vice President of the Chicago chapter. And one of the things that is really important here for us in Chicago is that it is the most militarized school district in the nation. And some of the things that we do today, I'm really excited to talk about how we are in a movement to demilitarize the Chicago public schools. And so I'm joined today with a really dynamic panel who's going to talk about what that looks like in their, that there's a connection between the work that we're doing around truth in recruitment, counter-recruitment, and really demilitarization. So I want to, get to the point in which we, really talk about like what's at stake and what we can do as a community. So I want us to like share in this moment. I want us to also talk about like, what does it look like for other chapters that may not be doing this work, but how, again, that we can stand in solidarity and in community to ensure that our young people get career technical education in lieu of JROTC, ROTC, and military recruitment. One of the things that we notice here in Chicago, look, there's 96% of the students that are enrolled in JROTC are Black and Latinx, overwhelmingly poor, from marginalized communities, under-resourced schools. So what we see here is that, these schools not only have, decades of underinvestment, but what we see is that in schools that have JROTC, there's not engineering, there's not, home economics, there's a lack of, secondary post-secondary options for young people to take. And so what happens is, a lot of these young folks are actually in a space where they're kind of forced into JROTC. Over the years, our team has submitted Freedom of Information Act request, or FOIA, to find like where this enforcement is coming. And they're getting young people right into high school. So in the 9th and 10th grades, some schools have almost 100% of their students enrolled in JROTC. And what we also glean from that is that in 11th grade, they drop off. And so it's mandatory that they're putting these young people in JROTC. And a lot of these schools have a lack of physical education teachers. So again, it's a high school graduation requirement to have 2 years of PE or JROTC. And so these schools are really, funneling folks, young people of color, particularly Black and Latinx, into JROTC without post-secondary other options. We see it as a recruitment tool. Quite honestly, we spend a lot of time talking to Chicago Board of Education. What we're gathered from that over the years of doing that is that they're not inclined to roll back their relationship with the Department of Army or Department of Defense, right? There's Department of Army, Air Force, and Navy JROTCs here in Chicago. So what we're doing now is we're transitioning and just say, we're gonna empower the people with knowledge. And so we're still formulating our workshops, but our outreach is going to be directly to young people who's already talking about demilitarizing their schools in terms of police. And so we're building that wedge in terms of what it looks like to not have recruiters in school, and also what it looks like to not enroll in JROTC. And because that's a decision that also involves the parents, we're looking at educating parents around what does it look like to opt out? What does it look like to ensure that your student their child does not, enforce on the school? Essentially this: if there are no students enrolled in JROTC, that program is not viable and it will be, terminated from the school. So we're looking at empowering the community to get at this thing. So again, there'll be points in the conversation in which, I'll share more and reflect, but, just really want to open up this space and say that I'm really glad to see so many folks on the line with us today. I'm really excited about our conversation. So again, HART, I know that you are doing extremely important work in your area. Please, would you, come on and talk more talk more about your work and share with us in terms of how things are going in the Austin area. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha. For about the last 10 years, we've been going into the high schools with sustainable options for youth. I am a lifetime member of Veterans for Peace, About Face member. This is Meister, the cat. Hey, Meister, how you doing, buddy? War Resistor League, spent some time with them, and they got some good flyers that we have always used on our tables. And basically working within the schools, you have 15 schools there in Austin, and our tabling is in a way that it's, we found it best interactive. We have a piece wheel that, I'm gonna write like war, racism, greed, sexism, ecocide, peace, liberation, equality, justice, and education. So whatever kid lands on whatever, you can direct them towards that particular group fighting that cause, whether it's Black Lives Matter, Save Our Screens Alliance, which is the anti-ecocide group in Austin, Texas. The penny pole, where we have, I just make these home jars, eat a lot of peanut butter and jelly, so got plenty of that. Healthcare, military, education, NASA, environment. We give the kids 10 pennies, and they vote on where they want that tax money to go. And they always vote for the most beautiful world. It's education, healthcare, environment have the most pennies. Then we show them this flyer from War Resistor League on the actual budget. And, we try to really emphasize voting, your 5 rights in the First Amendment, speech, assembly, press, petition your government for grievances, religion, as the toolbox to get that world that they voted for, that they created. We also got plenty of stickers, love stickers, t-shirts are the draw. The kids want a shirt, they have to spin the peace wheel. They got to vote in the penny poll. They got to visit the pull-up bar. Pull-up bar can't make an appearance here, sorry. But, and the pull-up bar, they don't really have to do the pull-ups. They can hang on the bar, or just basically I ask them what they want to do after they graduate. And that is where you get to have that conversation of whether empowering the kid or, warning them on particular like military, where you have flyers from War Resistor League, what every girl should know about the military. They want to be a cop, so you want to be a cop. Let them know the dangers of that. Another great flyer from the War Resistor League. And, basically information on like Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, continuing college education. Don't really got that, left that in Austin. I'll be taking this part to Flagstaff, Arizona. And you got to be able to have those options. You got to have the solution, the answer. You can't just be complaining about the war, all the problems. It's a downward spiral. But I mean, that's the kind of mode that we've taken this tabling as a cross-sectional war, racism, greed, sexism, and ecocide, being able to identify all those supervillains and giving those kids the options of peace, liberation, equality, justice, and education as the superheroes that fight that. And tabling for me has just been like the sustaining part is true. I feel every time I've gone into a school, I feel it's a win. You see those kids listening. It's a vastly different environment than if in the political sphere. But also, I've done what I've kind of coined Actors for Peace. I've gone into job fairs and colleges dressed as a teacher, suit and tie, and chatting up the recruiters there that are tabling, saying that, I'm a veteran too, so I can speak, and I got all these kids, they should know about the military, just kind of play the character of the anti-me. so I can collect as much material as I can from them and then recycle it. Tearing up recruiting material it feels good. It's a bit cathartic. You see this piece of material of the war and you're actually ripping it up, stopping it from ever fulfilling its intended use. And with Actors for Peace, you can converse, which I've done as well in a particular Austin Community College, taking up the recruiter's time. Not being adversarial, but just reminiscing about the good old days and ha 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 ha, and, or just asking questions. And I thought, we could also train our students to do this and pretend like they're interested in joining and ask all the questions and get all the material to recycle it. And if you get a group of 5 kids to act theater in front of a recruiting table, they could totally blockade the recruiter. The recruiter will go back to the office, say he had the best day, gave away all his business cards, gave away all his flyers. He doesn't know they're all being torn up and thrown in the recycle bin, stuff like that I like to think about. Let's see. I think that maybe I went through it too fast. So I'm gonna wait till the question and answers to see if we can fill that out a little bit more. Yeah.
No, thanks, Hart. That was great. I love that you brought the visuals. Some of that stuff I'd love to get our hands on here in Chicago, so that we can, do that. One of the things that's been really difficult for us is actually getting into the school. So here in Chicago, there's like great autonomy, or principals have great autonomy. And so they, can kind of dictate who's in the schools. You had another thought, Hart?
Yeah, somebody on the chat. Sports team, yeah. Sports, from elementary sports to professional are being militarized. And there was one time I got a tax return and I sponsored a youth softball team with Veterans for Peace. And they had Veterans for Peace on the back. I wish I got the bigger package, because if you sponsor a Little League team, you can get not only the Veterans for Peace on the back, but you could get a board, like an advertisement in the outfield of Veterans for Peace. That's the only way that I thought I could address the sports in my capacity. But, apart from like going to the professional games, which can be expensive, and, putting out, fans are dying in Iraq and Afghanistan, players strike to bring them home, or, if anything, it's a wonderful place to be. But sponsoring youth teams, because even in these youth team tournaments, because I coached this team too, going to these tournaments, and there's like little kids, baseball and softball, wearing camouflage uniforms, as part of their softball stuff. And it's just a matter of normalcy of militarization from the youth all the way to, adulthood. I realized that when I was in the schools talking to these high school kids, I was battling against years and years of normalization of militarization, and we definitely need to be able to full spectrum counter-recruitment and recognize, from war toys to sports to the education system, be able to approach this full spectrum. Okay.
Thanks, Hart, for that. Completely agree. And we see that here in Chicago, you'll see young folks waiting on the bus stops to get to school in battle dress uniform, right? Most of us, the fatigues. And to see that, and then it's a young person with a book bag, and you'll see that across the south and west sides of Chicago, again, because those are the the young groups that are overrepresented and in GHIRARDI as well. And one of the things that is like really critical is like, how do you get in. I see someone is not able to hear. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. Okay. Thank you. So one of the things that we look at is principals have autonomy of who they can allow in their building. But here we do work with the CTU's Teacher for Social Justice. And so these are a group of, teachers who have social justice as their and equity as their banner interest areas. And so what we do is they invite us into their classroom. Many of you know Arnie, that's here in the Chicago chapter. His son, Dave, is a high school social studies teacher and happens to be the young poetry coach. And so he has us in his classrooms a lot, as well as other, schools across the district. And so one of the things that I do when I'm in those spaces is talk about my own experience in JROTC. I'm a product of it. So I know that it's a recruitment tool because of how my JROTC instructor introduced me to my recruiter. Straight up. There was no room in between JROTC and me going down to actually it was the Marines, but that didn't, my recruiter just never followed up, and the Air Force gentleman who was in the same office area had say, hey, he's not here, but I'll talk to you. And 20 years later, I retired from active duty. So one of the things that the young people like to hear is, okay, well, what was it like for you? Because JROTC looks like this. And so I'm able to tell young people, because I had that JROTC experience, this is what JROTC is. This is where it is completely not that, right? And talking about what it was like in your, what it was like in our, in basic training, and how there's, breaking you down, and, the real life experience that you get when you immediately go into basic training, and then sharing those experiences and across those 20 years where moral injury set in. Listen, because one of the things that they tell us in Chicago is to get away from the violence, go and join the military. That'll get you away from the mean streets of Chicago. But then I'm able to tell young people that that's not a real thing, because you become the person who either supports or participates in that violence on a global scale, thus the moral injury. So thank you for bringing that up around how you engage in school spaces. A lot of times we found that it's telling your personal story, letting young people know where your injuries, particularly if, for veterans, or if you're a family member, right? I think for those that are associate members, they help out a lot in talking about what does it look like to be a family member of a military service member, and why they're in this space as well. So thank you so much, HART. We're gonna transition on to Chris. Chris, would you please join us and share what your work looks like and why you're in this movement for truth in recruiting?
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for the invitation to join this panel. It's such a pleasure listening to you, HART, and Natasha. My name is Chris Venn, and I am a part of a neighborhood organization that sponsors peace and social justice clubs at 2 high schools in the Los Angeles area. And these 2 high schools are part of a loose alliance of 5 high schools that have peace clubs in Southern California. It's an honor to make a presentation to the VFP National Convention. I'm going to talk about working inside high schools and creating school-based clubs as a component of truth in recruiting. For example, the Peace and Social Justice Club at San Pedro High School, which is part of Los Angeles, is a voluntary club that meets once a week during lunch. The club is student run. It's sponsored by a history teacher and facilitated by a neighborhood peace organization. That's me and other volunteers. The clubs elect their own officers who chair and run the meetings. Meetings consist of organizing on their high school campus and hosting guest speakers from numerous peace and social justice groups in the greater Los Angeles community. I mention this to share that our most effective speakers are Veterans for Peace members. I am constantly surprised by the students' reaction to the description Veterans for Peace. It's as if they don't believe that there could be a person who is a veteran for peace. And so I'm constantly on the lookout for veterans who can find the time to speak to students. I mean, the response is just remarkable. With the closing of the high schools in Los Angeles and California, across the country, I guess, except for the South, the club suspended activities. So the school closed, everyone stayed at home. We have tried several Zoom meetings, but we're unsuccessful in maintaining activity of the club. We are going to do our best to resume activity this fall with Zoom events. I want to reach out to all of you to please consider speaking at this club. I can be reached through Veterans for Peace, and I mean, it's so unfortunate that with this pandemic, but it's opened up vistas with Zoom meetings where we can, you know, have speakers from across the country. In the past, I've been involved in a number of efforts to reach high school students. If I can digress for a moment, the peace group I belong to is called SPNPJ Neighbors for Peace and Justice. It began in March 2003 as a response to the war on Iraq. The peace clubs I'm mentioning began in 2005. So since March 2003, I've been involved in a number of efforts to reach high school students concerning military recruitment on high school campuses. As a community peace organization, we feel reaching out to high school students about joining the military is one of the ways, is the way we can be most effective. So over the years, early on in our work, our efforts began with the distribution of leaflets in the front of the school in the morning before classes began. Probably some of you have had that experience. We did this at our local high school, San Pedro, and at high schools throughout Los Angeles, which was pretty cool. We got to visit a lot of high schools and meet the different communities. This was a one-time effort. Our contact with the students was very brief, and sometimes our presence in front of the high school involved dealing with school administration officials. You know, what are you doing here? You know, how come you're here? Do you have permission? Of course we have permission. It's a public sidewalk, but more on that later. In 2003, when our community group began, one of our members was the French teacher at San Pedro High School. He started something called the World Peace Club, which has been evolving over the years. When he retired from teaching in 2005, we continued the club with other volunteers, including me. I hope this presentation is working. This is kind of based on personal experience, and there's a great ending to my presentation. The relation with the high school, and this is the major point of my presentation, changed from a brief contact with students at the front gate of the school in the morning, and a sometime conflict with school administrators to a completely transparent relationship with the school. I'll explain a little bit about it. Our developing objective over the years has been to fight for a seat at the table when there is a discussion about the role of military recruiters on high school campuses. Listening to Natasha and HART's presentation, I realized that there's a different culture across the country. So my experiences with Southern California. So I hope this resonates with you. So to fight for a seat at the table when there is a discussion, maybe I should say to encourage that there be a seat at the table when there is a discussion about the role of military recruiters on high school campuses. If the school is discussing how much access to provide recruiters, we, the peace community, want to be part of the discussion. Kind of this is the basis of our understanding of truth in recruiting. If you will, a component of counter-recruiting. So how does this work? Any activity where the Peace Club, the sponsors, is involved in is cleared with our teacher sponsor. So that's the teacher who allows us to use their classroom and is kind of on the lookout for us, helps us navigate school bureaucracies, helps us be kind of politically correct in the school, keeps us out of trouble. So any activity we're involved in is cleared with our teacher sponsor, with the dean of students at the school, with the principal, the activity director, campus security, and even legal staff when needed. For example, sometimes our brochures at the career office are challenged. This has developed into such a deep basis of trust that our volunteers and guests are treated with enthusiasm and respect when we cross the campus. We term this approach truth in recruiting. So am I okay on time? Am I okay? A bunch of bullet points. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Arlington West, setting up crosses in a public space to show the cost of war. In Southern California, a wonderful member of Veterans for Peace by the name of Jack Finley developed something called the Teen Memorial. And that's white crosses, each with a picture of a teenager that was killed in the first 4 years of the Iraq War, and a short bio. The Washington Post at the time would run a picture and a bio of every teenager that was killed in Iraq or Afghanistan. We take that teen memorial to high school campuses, and because of the relationship we have with the school authority, they let us set it up in the quad in the middle of the school, and it's very, very dramatic. Let's see. One time we had a member of About Face who was helping us with the memorial, and he took off for 5-10 minutes, and he walked through every cross. Usually there are about 400 crosses. We usually set up 75 in the school quad based on the amount of time we have. and he walking back and forth among the crosses, and he found a comrade that had been killed in Afghanistan on one of the crosses. We do the club this year has started doing banner drops on the high school wall with the, of course, with the knowledge of the principle about climate change. We began at a new high school this year called Fairfax High School, and when you first enter a high school, they're kind of very suspicious of you and want to know why you're there, what you're doing. And when I happened to meet the principal in the hallway, he challenged me. And when I said I was helping to start a peace club, he came up and gave me a huge embrace and said, "That's exactly what we need at this school." They're called different things through the country, but in Southern California, they're called Club Booth Day, where the student clubs present, they do recruiting for club members, just all kinds of different clubs. So we get visibility for the club and recruit students for the club. Let's see, part of our activities, we try to involve students on participatory activities. So we make our own t-shirts. Raising money in the community is a very important part of our work because we seek to self-sustain the club, and we're able to reach out to the community and introduce the community at something called First Thursday to high school peace activists. I mentioned that an important part of the club activities are guest speakers, and the message is about peace, confronting recruiters, and social justice. And the most important theme that emerges with these guest speakers is that these are people that have made a difference, and so can the students. Perhaps the most important aspect of these high school peace clubs is student leadership. We follow strict adherence to this policy. 12 years ago, we started a summer peace camp for students, which is to train high school students how to start and maintain clubs on their campuses. That's it. I hope this has been helpful, and during the question and answer, I look forward to your questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Chris. I was taking a lot of notes. I'd like to follow up with you as well on some of the, the organizing ideas that's working out west. I think, I talked about Chicago being the most militarized school district, and we see that California was able to, do some really good work, and then the organization as well. So we're looking forward to, linking up with you in that way. And so at this point, Gary, is this a good point for us to either you want to talk, or should we go ahead and start with the video?
Go ahead and start with the video first.
Okay, so we're going to show a short video, and so sit back and enjoy, and those, please keep yourselves on mute. It helps with the sound while the video plays. Thank you.
One step, one best of 5 away from their dream of holding the title of world champions, but it's going to be the hardest step they've ever had to take. number one opens up.
We're going to get into the game immediately on Pokemon Stadium 2, of course.
Like Overwatch League is what basically like a franchise sports league essentially. Yeah, it's kind of like the NFL, NBA. Like we go traveling to Asia, like Europe and stuff like that. We have home games, away games.
Soldiers will train to compete in esports tournaments, take part in recruiting engagements, and interact with the public on a daily basis. The selected team members will be assigned to recruiting command at Fort Knox, Kentucky for 3 years.
Just like we have the Golden Knights, the Army Marksmanship Unit, you know, obviously having an esports team is kind of a no-brainer because we participate in so many outreach activities.
Now, are you talking to people about recruitment while they're gaming here?
Absolutely. So this is the direct engagement to say, you know, hey, come on in, have some fun. Obviously, we're not going to stop you mid-game like, hey, have you thought about your outreach stuff? Yeah, obviously, we want you to have fun.
Yeah.
So go ahead and have fun and, you know, have fun with us. And then if the Army is something you want to talk about or you just want to hear more information because information is free, that's what we're here for.
So it's like an old-fashioned television ad, except it's tucked right into the natural flow of the gaming environment. Yes.
Thank you, Gary, for sharing that video. Some really good nuggets in there in terms of what we can do. We are not helpless in this space. We just need to organize. So Gary, thank you so much for joining us. I know you come with a wealth of experience and knowledge, so please go ahead and insert how you joined this space and why you see this as a critical moment to organize. Gary, the floor is yours.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning, Veterans for Peace across America and People for Peace as well. Sorry about the video being a little choppy. These resources will all be available to you in a document after the workshop. You can watch it at a much better speed. My experience in counter-recruitment came through working with groups regionally in the California area. I started working with a committee on militarism in the draft and segued to working with a local counter-recruitment group called Project on Youth and Non-Military Opportunities. A couple of years after, I was asked to join as sort of a media support person for the National Network Opposing the Militarization of Youth. And that's where I work right now. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation to share with all of you. Let me get that queued up here. Hold on, share my screen. Tell me if you can see my screen. Yes? Okay, we'll start. This presentation is part of the workshop today. It's full spectrum counter recruitment for the 2020 Veterans for Peace Convention. I've worked not only with National Network Opposing the Militarization of Youth, but I've actually worked also with Warrior Sisters International in London. I helped set up a website for them about counter recruitment internationally. Here's a quote that I placed in the presentation from Veterans for Peace. They make it quite clear that our country is addicted to war and that we need to start pursuing a national policy of diplomacy and peace. I won't stay with this too long. You can read it on the presentation that's available as a PDF. Let's move on with the presentation for now. Veterans for Peace has 120 chapters across the United States and the world. And some of those chapters do truth in recruitment and counter-recruitment outreach to young people. You know, one of the goals and hopes with this presentation today is we can get more groups interested in doing this type of activism in their communities and schools. Here's a group in the UK, the Veterans for Peace in Great Britain. I'm going to read this because I think it's an important statement. Counter-recruitment or truth in recruitment by peace veterans is one of the most effective forms of witness about the realities of military service to our youth, because our young people recognize the value of the real in a popular culture so obsessed with the virtual. This is a screen capture of the Truth in Recruiting site on the Veterans for Peace National site, and it's a good resource. There's a link down there to connect to it. VFP chapters have reached out to youth in high schools, tabling materials about the realities of military service and alternatives to joining the military. Here's a group in Wisconsin, VFP chapter 25, tabling at one of their local high schools. Here's VFP chapter 89 from Nashville, Tennessee, tabling in a high school in their area. And also tabling about the realities of military service at career fairs where the military were simultaneously recruiting. Here's VFP chapter 132 in Corvallis, Oregon, tabling in a career convention in their area. VFP chapters have tabled information at town fairs as well. Here's an older slide from 2006 of a VFP chapter 001 in Maine, tabling at a community fair. VFP chapters have sponsored cultural events to offer a deeper reflection on what our wars and the service to them mean beyond superficial patriotic tropes and the importance of pursuing peace. Here, chapter 41 from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, sponsored a peace poetry contest, talking about what it means to engage in peace work. VFP chapters have developed exhibitions in the community to educate about the realities of wars. Here's chapter 93 from Ann Arbor, Michigan, making an exhibit at a local university about the My Lai massacre. We need more of that. And establish peace scholarships to students from military families. Here's chapter 50 from Traverse City, Michigan, awarding a $1,000 scholarship to a young woman who comes from a military family to go to school. VFP chapters have also developed IQ tests for students to make them think more deeply about military service and what it could mean in their lives. This is from chapter 92. They've developed a military IQ test to get students to think more deeply what the realities are about joining the military and to kind of confront their misconceptions, what they believe military service is about. VFP chapters have developed media resources and used those by other peace groups to get a more critical message about how militarism affects our communities and impacts our youth. Here's a group called Stop Recruiting Kids. They produce an enormous amount of memes that are circulated on the internet. And chapter 35 from Spokane is sharing their resources on their Facebook page. Here's local San Diego Veterans for Peace running billboards that were parked on an overpass over the freeway close to where the Miramar Air Show was beginning. This was a protest against turning militarism into sort of a form of entertainment for the community. New challenges, yet new challenges for peace groups are emerging in our schools and communities as the military struggles to meet its recruitment quotas and young people are less willing to enlist or cannot meet basic qualifications. And we see an unprecedented response from the Department of Defense to meet their quotas by introducing or expanding militarized programs into our public schools that are basically assuming educational roles for our economically vulnerable students, or directly militarizing public schools to prepare our youth configured for military recruitment. And this is a perfect example of what's going on in Chicago, where these young people are actually in schools that have been turned into basically JRTC campuses. And to increase their influence by doing so, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine JRTC unit expansion looming in our public schools represents the greatest existential threat to civilian education in the United States and is the canary in the coal mine for advancing cultural militarization for our country. The service, which is trying to grow to 500,000 active duty soldiers by 2028, has found that Americans at high schools with JRTC programs are more than twice as likely to enlist after graduation, according to Major General John R. Evans, Jr., who helms Army Cadet Command. There currently are proposals in Congress to increase the number of schools with JRTC from the current 3,400 to 6,000 by 2031. Department of Defense Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math programs, the STEM programs, are continuing to gain a greater presence in our public K-12 primary and secondary public schools and in our junior colleges and universities. School districts hard-pressed for funding resort to Pentagon offers and relinquish the role for teaching science classes and replacing physical education periods with JRTC. In the near future, post-COVID, this need is likely to only increase. Here's an example of JRTC, switching over from PE classes, switching over to JRTC units in the schools. And increasingly, schools are allowing students to take JRTC to satisfy their physical education requirements. And now with the pandemic that we're all going through, and schools closed due to concerns about viral spreading, military recruiters have temporarily lost access to high schools for in-person military recruitment contact with youth. So the Pentagon is allowing recruiters to go on social media platforms without strict guidelines to reach youth through organized teams called esports. And the military is recruiting youth through organized online gaming. Here's an example of one of the Facebook pages that's reflecting the actual online sports that's going on. You can see by the amount of people following this and the people that like this, that it has a huge following and it's growing rapidly. There are links here for you to go to this Facebook page, and it's actually live. That man in the small window is practically there, for, 8 hours a day, mediating this whole process. And this is just one site. The other services are developing their own presence on multiple social media platforms and following the strategy of reaching youth for recruitment purposes. The US military is the largest employer on the planet, but it's not a jobs program. It was created to fight wars. The Pentagon esports platforms were not created for gaming. They were designed for the purposes of military recruitment. The Army's esports teams, which began in 2018, has never had overwhelming public support. The use of popular shooter strategy games such as Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, Global Offensive, Fortnite, Magic, The Gathering, and more to recruit gamers was seen as morally questionable by some, and hopefully more will also start questioning this type of outreach to young people. War is not a video game. Additionally, an important aspect about militarized video games is not that they create or don't create serial shooters, as defenders of this type of entertainment consistently conflate as an issue when peace activists raise concerns, but rather desensitize the gamer population to real violence and normalize militarization as a solution to problems resulting in conflict. Hours spent participating in ritualized virtual killing has a cost, and this normalization ultimately serves to promote the brand of the military and supports militarized foreign policy unconsciously. And of course, when coupled with Pentagon e-game sponsorship, it produces direct recruitment contact with participating gamers and opportunities for military recruiters to data mine participants for later attempts to recruit them. Those of us in the peace community that take issue with unlimited access to our children and youth by Pentagon recruitment programs in our schools and online will push back. But we need more participation by historical allies like Veterans for Peace to alert public concern about new recruitment technologies directed at our youth by the Department of Defense. We need more allies in schools like sympathetic teachers and school administrators who care enough about their students that they will allow peace veterans into their schools to talk about the realities of military service and the human costs of our wars. And we deserve a seat at the table with military recruiters when we are parents and it concerns our children's futures, their privacy rights, and our parental rights over minor age youth. According to a RAND study about Army enlistment, a full 46% said that they enlisted due to purely occupational reasons. Only 9% said they joined for entirely institutional ones. Misplaced national spending priorities result in insufficient alternatives to joining the military for many, but that makes it even more important to find the ones that do exist and raise awareness of them through the educational work of local and national CR groups. We need more teachers and students to form peace clubs in their schools. Here's an example of the Peace Club Alliance that Chris Venn works with here in Los Angeles. Who prioritize inviting peace veterans into classes to talk with students about the realities of military service and wars. Keep in mind that counter-recruiters can't directly invite themselves into schools. We need either teachers or administrators or students who have organized, as teachers and students have organized peace clubs to make those invitations to bring military veterans into our schools to talk. And those veterans will witness to our youth the realities of war and its impacts on lives, also in artistic expressions that can make connections. Here's a case of a VFP member and somebody who works with We Are Not Your Soldiers in the New York area that actually goes into schools and does hip hop performances about the topic of military recruitment and militarization of the experience of being a combatant in our wars. And also that connect with youth, a peace message and open their minds at a different future than military service. Here's HART working in Austin, Texas, tabling at one of the local high schools there. This is a very important relationship that we need to continue tabling in schools and learning from kids and kids learning from us what they're thinking about and how they perceive military service. And we need to connect with other concerned community members to activate pushback, to put limits on military in our schools and in our children. The military continually is pushing the limits of how much presence they have in our schools. And it's important that community members monitor that type of intervention in our schools and contact their school administrators and the principals of their local schools and make it clear that there needs to be limits to how much contact military recruiters have with their students. Here's an ask. Can Veterans for Peace convene a working group to address school militarization? There's a potential for peace networks to cooperate to develop strategies to coordinate their social media messaging collectively, to educate and raise public awareness, and to occupy the spaces and places where military recruiters are contacting children and youth. That means online during COVID and after in our public schools when they reconvene. Activists who seek to interject critical chats on military-sponsored esports gaming sites should assess which messaging to implement that will have the greatest impact with youth, but stay within the rules governing those social media platforms. And coordinate social media actions with multiple participants and chapters, if possible, to increase your presence to others in the gaming environment, and to put on notice both the military and youth gamers that activists are monitoring these sites with concerted concern for militarizing messages and an awareness of military recruiting taking place. The Department of Defense, with its unlimited budget, will adopt new forms of military recruitment to conform to the technology that youth use to communicate with and to each other. Truth in recruitment activism needs to innovate for the changing times. Cultural militarization will increasingly divide our country and does not serve a legitimate national defense. Discuss in your chapter the essential importance of demilitarizing our schools. Those who campaign for the cause of maintaining civilian-controlled public schools struggle to maintain our democratic values. Can your VFP chapter participate? If your VFP chapter does counter-recruitment or truth in recruitment activism in your community, please let the national counter-recruitment community know by listing your chapter's youth demilitarization activism in the National Directory of Youth Demilitarization Groups. Here's a screen capture of that site on the Nomi website. There's a link below. You can get that later with the resources we'll share in the chat. We currently have the national and 9 other chapters listed that do counter-recruitment work. Nomi Peace is here to assist your chapter with resources and the experience of truth in recruitment and counter-recruitment groups nationally that comprise our work. Here's one of those resources. This is a resource available that's shared on young people's cell phones. We did the research on this. About 95% of young people access the internet now on their cell phones, not on computers. It's important we get this message in formats that they can read on their phones. This is a case where that exists, and it's available in English and Spanish. The Before You Enlist video is an amazing resource. It also is available in English and Spanish. It's been configured also for smartphones, and that resource has been produced by American Friends Service Committee in conjunction with Nomi, and it has the witnessing of veterans from About Face, Veterans Against the War, and Veterans for Peace vets. And then this is an important point here. We have produced a website for military alternatives to the military called peacefulcareers.org. Please check this site out. It's available for smartphones soon. We're developing that site now. This is an important issue beyond counter-recruitment and truth in recruitment. We need to offer alternatives to joining the military that are viable, and also appeal to the moral issues surrounding why not to join the military. Thank you for participating in this workshop. We can get more done together. And thank you for your work, Veterans for Peace. Also, there'll be a printable PDF version of this presentation that'll be placed on the webpage of this workshop on the nomi.org website. We'll place those links in the chat coming up here soon. And also, I just want to introduce you to where the Nomi office is located. It is in the San Diego Peace Campus in San Diego, an amazing place where we share with both peace churches and peace organizations like the U.S.-Mexico Border Project of the American Friends Service Committee. Also, real quickly, here's the webpage on our website about today's workshop. At the bottom, you'll see links to all the things that we shared today, and you can play the video at a much better rate of speed than it produced today. This is an important resource for Nomi. This is the Back to School Demilitarization Organizing Kit. It has resources for counter-recruitment and truth in recruitment groups to share that's on multiple categories around reaching young people on everything from counter-recruitment in general, issues dealing with gender in the military, GRTC, the delayed entry program, privacy issues, opt-out forms, and resources for organizers. This is the Nomi website. This is an important tool. It has a huge amount of knowledge and resources in it. And this is a very good resource to get you started if you want to form your own group, or you have a group and you want to keep up on what's the latest going on with counter-recruitment and truth in recruitment activism. This is our blog where we run our articles. It's nomipeace.net. This is our Peaceful Career Alternatives website that were mentioned earlier. Please check that out. This is the Committee Opposed to Militarism in the Draft website, a great resource and important tool in the peace community. And this is the Project Yano website, projectyano.org. This is a preeminent counter-recruitment group in the country. Please check out their work, it's very important. And this is the International Countering the Militarization of Youth site, developed by Warrior Sisters International in London. Please check it out. Very good tool also, and it's available in German, English, and Spanish.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. It's a wealth of information. If you can just stop sharing your screen. Okay. And then we can, thank you so much. Sorry. Yeah, and so, no, this was great. This was a wealth of information. Those links will be shared as a follow-up. But Gary, also, if you can also share them in the chat to the function where it says all panelists and attendees, so that folks can just go ahead and click on them, open their browser, and minimize them to see later.
Okay, I'll do that now.
Thank you. And so in the interest of time, I want to move us on just so that we have some time to get some of the questions that we have. Hart, can you provide a link to these cool things your group presents? I think we actually.
As to like where I get my gear, or like the flyers.
Possibly the flyers, if there's, if you have any clickable links that we can go to. But okay. I'm also thinking about maybe as a follow-up, if you have like a picture and a snapshot, and maybe a Google Doc of like just some quick words on like how we can use those to kind of evolve, I think we'll probably, if you don't have the link.
War Resistor League website, you know, is like the place where you get the flyers and the pie chart for the stuff. American Friends Service Committee also has some good counter-recruitment stuff. American Friends Service Committee, I believe that's afsc.com for that. But yeah.
Okay, so that's great. Links would be great. And again, just as a follow-up, even if we don't do it here, if you think of ways in which maybe you can give like a screenshot again, so folks can kind of get some memory around how to replicate what you presented, which I think is really, really helpful, or will be helpful.
Cool.
Thank you. For the next question, someone says, I'm going to get yelled at for this idea. We don't yell. If someone is determined to join a service, do you think that guiding them to look into joining the Coast Guard is a viable anti-recruitment path? I'll just kind of quickly answer and say no. One of the things in my role on active duty was around talking to just women in all branches. The Coast Guard was, and I say women, marginalized folk, Black women, Latinx women, women across the board. The Coast Guard has its own unique set of issues that around military sexual trauma that just doesn't come out because it's not a dominant narrative to talk about the Coast Guard and what their growth areas are. So in terms of like recommending one branch over the other, I couldn't do that in good conscience. Anyone else have a response to that?
Yeah, my experience with the kind of, with the Coast Guard issue is that I don't mind the environmental protection. I don't mind the search and rescue, but I have issue with the law enforcement. So I give them, so you want to be a cop. But I also let them know that 1 out of 3 women who are sexually assaulted in the military, that 52% of all sexual assaults in the military are man on man, includes that Coast Guard experience. So I definitely give them warnings and pause on that. But I feel that environmental protection and search and rescue are viable missions in the humanity realm, you know what I mean?
Thank you, Hart. What advice do y'all, this one's a little lengthy, so I may repeat or split this up. What advice do y'all have for regions where conditions for any presence in truth and recruiting speakers, peace clubs, etc., is hostile? Not just by internal pro-militarists within school systems, but also sympathetic teachers with overwhelming mandates and overwhelming students to teach for testing and college prep. This person lives in Hawaii, which is essentially still a military colony deep in a war economy, and have been from the outside fence to the tenured teacher who try to teach peace clubs, essentially what can we do? So I know it's there for the panelists if you'd like to quickly, briefly reread it, but in talking about, the different regions and any, I think Gary, you kind of went over some of this in terms of regions and what works. Do you want to give a response to this question?
Could you repeat the question too? I was posting the links.
That's okay. What advice do you have for regions where conditions for presence of truth and recruitment speakers, peace clubs, etc., are hostile? Essentially, there's not just by the internal pro-militarists within the school system, but also by sympathetic teachers with overwhelming mandates and, quite honestly, overwhelmed students because they have to teach the curriculum or teach the testing and college prep. So a lot of times those sympathetic teachers, may not be realizing it, but that they're actually, playing a part in recruiting young people. So do you have any advice in terms of regions? This person is in Hawaii and is asking this question.
Well, let me say first to answer that question that, I work from the catbird seat. I'm the person looking at all of this from the office. And what I've seen over the years from the difference between regions is some areas are conservative, some areas are more progressive. And I think you need to adapt your message according to the area you're in. It makes no sense to come on like activists do in Seattle or New York or Chicago in areas that are in the South or in more conservative areas of the country. So I would bring to the table the idea that military recruiters are not giving the full picture of what it means to be in the military, and students deserve to have more information to understand what really is the complete story so that before they make that decision to join. So I think that's how they can moderate that issue.
Thank you. Chris, I know you had some points. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. It's a great question. I can't speak to different areas. I've just worked in the New England area and in California. But what I'd like to submit in answering this question is looking for allies, and teachers are. If anyone's going to save our world, it's teachers. And that teachers are just natural allies. When this question is presented to teachers in the right way, and when this resource is fully used, it can be an important way to, in my feeling, adapt to different areas of the country.
Thank you. Hart, did you have some thoughts around this point or this question?
Yeah, it's like the reason why we went with Sustainable Options for Youth as a name is that it was a soft approach to any possible contrary ears that may hear of our presence. You know, when you hear Sustainable Options for Youth, it doesn't sound very aggressive. So when you're working in a very deep militarized environment like Texas, you know, it kind of behooves you to kind of rework your approach, but still, you know, to get in the schools, you know, I imagine I'm going to experience that for the first time when I move to Flagstaff soon. Probably next year when this whole COVID thing passes, I'm going to be approaching the school board to solidify a particular, you know, presence in the schools. But as Gary said before, you know, if you get invited by a teacher, which, you know, I've been invited by a teacher in another school district, or a Peace Club invites you in, or, you know, that is also viable. Yeah.
And one of the things, thank you, gentlemen, for that. One of the things that, you know, what we do in Chicago really is to go and talk to the board, you know, which is a public body. Usually there's a public comment. Here in Chicago, it's limited to 2 minutes. In other districts, I've noticed it's up to 5. Use that opportunity, find out, go to the school board website, find out when their monthly meeting, take up space, invite teachers in that moment to say, hey, I am looking for allies who want to, you know, just learn more. And, you know, create a Zoom or create an offline where you can connect with those educators. And that's something that's really, it's good, and it gets you a lot of those, especially in this COVID realm where everything is virtual. So they're getting more participation, and those meetings are usually recorded and on the website for viewing later. So you never know how long you might get some responses there. Great PowerPoints. Moving on to the next question. Great PowerPoints. Will they be made available for others to use? Gary, this one, if you can share, actually we have that. And so Gary, as long as you're good, we'll share that with our membership.
Well, no, there's a new one. Get the one off the page that I shared with you on the Nomi website.
Okay,
because
great.
we had to add some additional information.
Okay, thank you. So the one that is on the that was presented, we'll present the one on the Nomi site.
Right, the one that's the first link at the bottom of the resources is the latest one, and it's a PDF.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. On to the next question. A bunch of progressive Dems voted against AOC's NDAA amendment to ban recruiters' use of online games, including mine, I think is this DeFazio. Why? Listen, a lot of these representatives have interest in, you know, they believe recruiting is good for children, and, you know, quite honestly, leads to privatization of schools, right? A lot of families who see a lack of resources in their school, again, when there's JROTC, will opt for choice, which is not their public school option, which leads to the proliferation of charter schools. We see that here in Chicago. The charter schools have just a different opportunity set. They have more, you know, one-to-one technology. And I'm just kind of going with, this is all kind of related and shouldn't just be kind of focused in on just the one part in terms of banning recruiters in online games, that this is also, we're seeing this show up in other spaces. So why progressive Dems would vote against it? It's a mystery. Does anyone have any thoughts there?
I'm sure in their districts, they have links to the military industrial complex with certain industries that have certain lobbyists that have their personal phone numbers.
Right.
Yeah. 5 minutes left.
Yeah, so I know. Is there still a national mandate disallowing youth to opt themselves out of recruiting? Most states have taken conservative reading of the law that only permits students 18 and over to opt out. Once in Hawaii, we were able to make opt out to all youth, but it was later overturned. Current status, I'll speak to Chicago. There's a opt out form. CPS updates it annually and does not release it until the fall. The opt-out forms are due no later than 1 December. So that gives parents just over a little less than 2 months to get that form, find it, complete it, and send it to the school. So what we're trying to do currently in Chicago is we're waiting on a board meeting, a member with a board member, to talk about how we include the opt-out form in all schools, high schools, with JROTC's recruiting, or excuse me, what is it called? Oh, I just lost the thought. Annually, you have to, your school registration forms. So like in my daughter's school, they were given a Google link with all of the mandatory forms that they have to fill out. We're asking for the opt-out form to be a part of that. Junior and senior parents can opt their children out here in Chicago. Does anyone else have any, like a different experience?
I just have a comment to make about that.
Yeah.
It would be really good if we can push to have that opt-out decision put on the same form where the parents have to sign to be the contact person in case there's an issue with the child in the school, so that there's no way they can avoid seeing that question, because they can bury that in the package and the parents never see it.
Mm-hmm.
So no, there's no, oh, thank you for pushing on that, Pete, is that only students who are 18 and older, which is traditionally a senior student. And so again, it's why we're making our workshops really tailored to parents, so that we get it out so that parents know that they should be looking out for this form. The last question, we have 3 minutes to go. In South Florida, what are the best ways to make connections with teachers who might become allies in helping us get into the classroom, sponsor a peace club, etc.? I feel like we, by this point, we've probably, just covered that a little bit. Reach out in any way. A lot of times when the teachers are organizing, I know that teachers in Florida are organizing around remote, going full remote. Find yourself in those spaces if at all possible, to find out what that would look like. Again, I think, sometimes because the teacher's duties are overwhelming, they might not really understand. So it might just take some organizing, maybe a one-on-one or coffee, to help them really understand what you're doing, what you're trying to move towards. And it's not taking something away from children. It's really to bring and bring home the point around them having a viable future that doesn't include militarism. Thank you for the questions. Thank you, gentlemen, for the panel discussion. This has been great. I learned a ton. Thank you, Gary, for sharing the links. We shared 2 links here around VFP is going to host in early September a working group around this topic. So please, if you haven't already done so, I see that it was just shared. It's going to be September 3rd at 7 p.m. virtual space. Fill out the form, join us, where we're going to strategize and talk about next steps. And then what that can look like when we start to partner with our organizations who have the same moral on this as we do, including Gary and Chris's organization. So again, thank you for joining us. This was great, and be well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Get on the next call so we can see your faces.
Okay.
I love y'all.
Peace.
Equally. Bye.
Peace.
So long.